this is the only way to do this. You will have to use, you will have to find out the length of your array. So if you want to find out what the length of your array is, you have to use this. Let's go ahead and literally do that. Let's go ahead and say print len, and I'll go my list, and there it is, my list, and my code completion, which is very cool. Hopefully you guys have downloaded PyCharm and are taking advantage of it, but everything that I'm doing here can also be done in idle as well. So let's go ahead and run it, and this time I'm going to pick the run button down here. And there, it says 5. It's letting me know that I have 5 elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very, very cool. So I know that I have 5 elements. What I can do is I can say for I, because I don't have to tell them that it's an integer or anything like that, in range. And we found out just a second ago that this will list the number of elements, right? So I do a Control V and pop that in there, and I'll just go ahead and do this again. And V and run it, and there you have it. It's done it twice, except that every single time X is 32. So what did I do wrong with this thing? X is 32. How can this be? Well, remember, I am still, if you will, in the same body in terms of the programming. So when I created E right there, when I created that critter, when I stuffed it with a value, the very last value that was stuffed into E from this operation was 32. And as you see, that's what we got. And it remembered that. Well, I don't want to print 32. What I do want to print is I. And this wouldn't, by the way, wouldn't be the first time I've pulled that one off or made that kind of a mistake in programming. It's perfectly legitimate to make mistakes. The key is being able to figure them out. All right. So here we go. 2, 5, 9, 81, 32. Well, fiddly diddly, it still didn't work. What in the world is wrong with this thing? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know what the problem is. We don't want to print the index. We want to print what's inside the index, right? So, are you ready for this? We want to print my list sub I. That looks really complicated, doesn't it? Well, let's take it apart and take a closer look. My list sub I is simply getting the ith element from my array, and then string is converting it into a string so that it can be safely concatenated with that right there. Okay, and it looks like it's a lot of business going on there, but it's really important to know this approach. All right, in fact, is sometimes when I see a lot of parentheses right there, I will follow my friend Kevin's advice, and I will put a little extra space around it so it's a little easier to see what's going on. Even here, put a little space there, little space there. Now it's just a little bit easier to read. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you. Oh buggers, I went to 17 minutes. So okay, then I was going to try to stop this at around 14 minutes so that I could wouldn't have to take it apart and do all this editing, but too late. We'll just keep on going. Okay, so when we are talking about these subscripts, when we are talking about these arrays, in this case I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements in this particular arrays. They often refer to this as a single dimension array with 5 elements in it. Okay? Programmers who are new to Python and are already familiar with other programming languages, they may try to create a list using the following technique. As you can see, it looks like what we're doing is we're taking my list sub I and setting the value 1 to it. In other words, it looks as though my elements in my list from 0 through 9 are going to get the number 1. So let's run this and see what it does. And it comes back with a big old nasty crash. Well, the reason it's coming back with a crash is because Python really needs to have some kind of a size or an alternative method in getting information onto our array. Okay, They need to know how big the thing is to begin with. If my list had some elements to begin with, as I did earlier, then my list sub I could have been replaced by the 1. For example, let's see, I'll just create another one up here. Actually, I don't need to do that. I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now let's run it and see what it does. It went through 10. Well, we better have a few more then. 6, 7, 8, 9. That should work. All right, let's see what happens. Run that. And it still crashes. It says here, index error. It's out of range. All right, so let's try one more. We'll go 10 and see what that does. Run it. There we go. It finished it. Okay, so what it did was it went through. I should have started with 0. That's what confused me. It went through and apparently poked the number 1 in each one of these spots, and we got away with that whole process. Let's print the list real quickly. We got away with that because all these elements, all these positions existed. See, when I declared my list to begin with, it now had places in memory to store the information, whereas before, when it only had an open and a closed bracket there was nothing to where, boy, good job talking here, Dave. It was I had no place to put the number 1 because it didn't exist yet. It has to exist. So let's go ahead and print this list out. Print my list. Let's see what that does. And there you have it. It replaced it all with 1s. We started out with, the numbers 1 through 10, and then down here replace it all with 1s. So we know that it ran, but the key is it all has to exist in the first place, which begs the question, well, if I want to create a sequential set of numbers, how in the world am I going to do this? Well, we're going to take literally advantage of some of the programming syntax that we see in other languages. For example, let's go back here and get this back to the way it was. Instead of saying my list sub I is going to be equal to something, I am going to literally do this. I'm going to say my list dot append, and see where it says append, and I just put in the number that I want in there, or in this case it would be I, right? So there it is. I is in there. I found a way, hopefully, to create a list of the numbers, in this case 0 through 10, right? So, or 0 through 9. Let's see how it works out. Print my list. There it is. And we'll run it and see what it gives us. There it is, 0 through 9. So it worked like a champ, all right? So a list, unlike an array, which once you define it in memory never changes, which is typical of other languages, a list, you can change its size. And that's what makes lists so cool, because you can add to them if you need to. Another way of doing this, and by the way, what we're creating here is what's known as a comprehension. And I don't know that you're ever going to hear that term again. I don't know too many programmers that actually use that term. But on the outside chance that you do, I'll let you know that a comprehension is just an expression that specifies a sequence of values. Okay? You saw that we used a loop to produce this nice little range of numbers 0 through 10. Well, we can, if we want to, we can actually make it all happen in one neat little pass. And the way that we do that is inside these brackets, we're actually going to write a tiny little Python program. So 0, so that it knows where to start, right? We're going to start at 0. For I in range 10. Okay, so let's see how it works. Didn't work too good, did it? We've got to figure out what we did wrong. Guess it would have helped if I would have not used 0 there. Remember, we want to go iterate through I, and range 10 is going to take I and increment them from 0 through 9, right? So what I'm interested in is the I. So what I do here is I say I, and then I say, well, what am I going to do with I? Well, I'm going to go through a loop. I'm going to store inside I a number from 0 through 9. Okay? So that's another way of populating a list of numbers into MyList. So what if you want to, say, get the squares of the first 10 numbers? I can just go I times I, like so. And let's see how that works. There it is, 1, 2, 4, 9, 16, and so on and so forth. It gave me the squares for the first from 0 through 9. So we were able to do actually a ton of work in one very small place. And this is where the power of Python comes into play, because in truth Python will allow us to take, it will allow us to take a little function, whatever it is, and use it as a variable, which is kind of cool. All right, and that principle in Python made it possible to write this section of code. But if this is too confusing and you want to use just a loop like we did earlier, by all means do that, because everybody has to start walking before they can run, right? But I thought I would pass this on for those folks who are interested in going a little bit down the advanced road of things, if you will.